Hey everyone, and welcome to Quick Review. Today I'm looking at Vambrace Cold Soul. I received a copy of this game about a week before it came out, and I decided to take a look at it because it labeled itself as a roguelike game. I look at a lot of roguelike games, and it's probably come to be one of my favorite genres. Really though, there's nothing roguelike about this game. If I was going to label it as anything, I'd call it a turn-based survival game that's largely story-driven. There are elements that may be considered roguelike. Yeah, it's turn-based, that's kinda like Rogue. Areas are sort of randomly generated, and death for hired characters is permanent. So, there's stuff, but I think this may be one of the most generous usages of the terms in recent memory. Also, I dumped something like 30 hours into this game. I was pretty close to finishing it, but it's pretty much the only story-driven game I've looked at without 100% finishing it. There are some reasons for that I'll get into, but I think I've given this game more of a chance and progressed further than any other review I've seen pop up, so bear that in mind. Anyways, who cares? Nitpicking. Let's talk about the game for what it is. You're thrown into a barren, snowy world that's been largely taken over by wraiths and ghosts, and there's a story that unravels around how that all came to be. Your character wanders into all of this because her father was, in some way, also involved in all of this. That's part of the unraveling story. After the intro, you're basically thrown into a story world that has you meeting a lot of the side characters, exploring a small overworld that allows you to hire characters for battle, craft items, and rest up. It also offers a wide variety of side quests, but most of them become available later in the game. The basics of combat are thrown at you very quickly, and you're pretty much straight into exploring the barren world as you try to hunt down an escaped prisoner. The turn-based combat was actually decent. Over the course of the first chapter or two, things are pretty bland. You have different characters that serve different roles. Healers, tanks, ranged characters, melee characters, the normal stuff. As you progress though, you get equipment that allows you to change some of the attacks associated with classes of characters. And it actually does a decent job of complicating combat, giving you the ability to customize your party more, and it's not as straightforward as it initially seems. I actually liked it. There wasn't a huge emphasis on strategy though, but it was still enjoyable. I think it was largely enjoyable because of the visual style of the game. Everything looks amazing. The world is drawn in a way that gives life to every single character, and the combat animations all looked fluid. It's a solid looking game. Now, I'm going to talk about the problems a little bit. I genuinely felt that the game had a solid base, but there are so many quality of life issues that I just couldn't enjoy the game as much as I wanted to. Before I get into this, I'm going to say I think almost any combination of these fixes could work to drastically improve the quality of the game. There is no single thing that could improve this game, but there are lots of little things that could, in combination, take this game to a level it currently isn't on. Alright, so to clear a chapter, you basically have to run through a large map. You do this by clearing 5 sub-areas. Each sub-area seems to have a preset layout with randomized rooms. Rooms can have enemies, traps, chests, a merchant, random events, campfires, and a variety of other things that seemed much more rare, like crafting benches. Every room you go through, you lose a stat called Vigor, and you gain a stat called Terror. If Terror passes a threshold, every room you go through is now guaranteed to have a fight in it with a preset group of enemies. If you run out of Vigor, your characters die, much like if they run out of health. You can clear a chunk of Terror by finishing an area, and you can recover Vigor or health at a campfire by resting or using items. You can only heal with items at a campfire. Resting at a campfire increases Terror. Clearing an area only partially wipes your Terror. And remember, rooms are randomized. Do we see a potential problem here yet? Basically, RNG controls the success of a run. Some runs you may never find a campfire, some runs you may only find enemies, and some runs you can hit 5 traps in a row and basically be dead in the water. You can, in theory, try to search out a campfire if there wasn't one on the main route you took, but that will increase terror and decrease vigor. So doing that will generally offset the benefits of searching out a campfire, because you'll either be royally screwed in the next sub-area because you have too much terror, or you'll wipe out more vigor than you'd be recovering. Also, fighting enemies builds up terror as well. So, the longer you take to win, the more terror you get. If you build a team that's focused on survival by leveraging healers, well, you're screwing yourself, because by the 4th or 5th sub-area, you'll have built up too much terror if you hit more than a few fights on that route. If you go with a squishier team that doesn't have healers, well, you'll be taking a lot of damage and you'll need to rely on finding campfires to stay alive. So if you get too many fights in a row, again, you're royally screwed. There are 2 ways to improve this. Let players use items away from campfires, because it's just insane that you can't. Or ensure that every area has an accessible campfire at some point, be it at the start or the end of a sub-area. Another problem: running. You can't run outside of the city area. So if you're trying to backtrack for that campfire, you're doing it at a snail's pace. If you're rerunning easier areas for items, you're also crawling along. Let me run. Why can't I run? Also, replaying areas. This may be one of the strangest choices I've ever seen in a game. I mentioned crafting earlier. You can craft items. In particular, you'll be crafting a lot of healing items. Some of the materials for these items seem to be locked to certain areas. So when I was looking for rope to make some second-tier healing items, I couldn't find them in the second area of the game. I had to go back to the first map to find these items. Why can't basic required items drop in later maps? Why do I need to backtrack to farm items that I absolutely need? Finally, and I say finally because I'm not going to ramble on much longer, even if there are other things that need to be fixed. Combat. I said I like combat in this game, and I do, but it's so incredibly slow, especially if you're going back to an earlier area to farm items, or try out new combinations of characters. Something as simple as a 2x or 3x speed up button would take combat from sometimes feeling tedious, actually often feeling tedious, to being fun or tolerable all of the time. Anyways, that's Vambrace Cold Soul. This game looked awesome, but it let me down when it came to the overall flow of the game. Honestly though, the story is solid, the game looks amazing, and the combat actually is not fundamentally flawed. There are some good bones here, and with a few quality of life improvements for the player, this game could easily transform into an incredibly solid experience. It's not there yet though. Balancing problems and slow, tedious gameplay, it all adds up. And don't forget, this is just my opinion. If you feel like I left something out, disagree, or just want to suggest something else for me to look at, leave a comment. I release a few reviews every week, so if you want to keep up with games that are coming out and you enjoyed this review, think about subscribing. I'll also be releasing non-review content like my upcoming video, Roguelike versus Roguelike, and how the terms are being rampantly misused. You don't want to miss it. Otherwise, thanks for watching.